Okay, I think we can go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the How Good Innovation Online series. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really looking forward to our next hour of discussion. As a way of introducing one another, if our audience member would like to put their name, where they're based, if you'd like, you can put your role or the company that you work for into the chat. That will give us a chance to get to know each other a little bit, even though we won't have time to introduce ourselves to one another. My name is Leah Wolf. I'm the head of regenerative education and content here at How Good. I am currently in Los Angeles, California, and I'm so excited to be speaking with our two panelists today. We're going to be talking about strategies for moving the needle toward more regenerative procurement with Dorothy Shaver, who is the Global Food Sustainability Director at Unilever, and Jay Watson, who is the Senior Manager of Global Impact Initiatives at General Mills. Just to run a quick agenda by you all for our time together today, we'll wrap up our introduction. We will have 40 to 45 minutes of conversation with our panelists. And finally, we'll wrap up with a Q&A with the speakers before we finish at the top of the hour. As we continue our discussion today, I'll just ask that the audience put any questions that you might have for our speakers into the chat. I'll do my best to get to them and relay them to our panel. I'm also really looking forward to our next two sessions. First, on March 3rd, we'll be joined by Claire Oliverson, who is the head of marketing for Too Good To Go, and Madeline Rotman, who is the head of sustainability for Imperfect Foods. And we're going to be talking about how food brands can use procurement as a tool to reduce food waste. And then on April 14th, we'll be talking to Felipe Viela, who is the founder and CEO of Renature, and Gael Legallard, who is a design manager at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. And we'll be talking to them about the role that procurement can and should play in the circular economy. I hope you can join us for one or all of the upcoming sessions. You can sign up for them at our website, howgood.com/innovation-series, and I will put that into the chat so that you all can go and sign up for every single one of them. So I would love to get started just by giving our two panelists a chance to introduce themselves a little bit. Dorothy, if you'd like to start, tell us a little bit about maybe your sustainability or regenerative journey, kind of what brought you to your position at Unilever. Yeah, just a bit about your background would be wonderful. Are you unable to unmute yourself? Okay, one second. Okay, you should be good.
Great, perfect. Hi everyone, I'm Dorothy Shaver. I'm absolutely delighted to be here today. I am, as Leah said, nutrition director. I used to be nutrition. I'm a global food sustainability director for Unilever, and I came along a long journey to get into this position. I'm a registered dietitian by background with a focus in public health and behavior change. I moved to many positions from clinical nutrition to retail nutrition to, which is why I say the word nutrition, of course, to Unilever Nutrition, and then over to Unilever Foods Marketing, and now Central Sustainability, so corporate sustainability team. Absolutely great to be here with you. I'm located in Amsterdam, the Netherlands, so a very different time of day for me, but I'm happy to be here, and I've been following How Good's journey. So great to be here to talk about our journey to regenerative agriculture, which was of help with some people from How Good.
Well, thank you so much for joining us at a time which I assume is much later than work hours. We really appreciate you taking the time.
It's okay, no problem. Happy to be here.
Jay, would you mind introducing yourself as well?
Yeah, hi, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, maybe. My name is Jay Watson. I work on the Global Impact team at General Mills. I serve as the initiative lead for our regenerative agriculture commitment. I also have a small staff focused on our water work and our climate ambition. I've been with the organization for 15 years, and the first 10 I spent in our sourcing organization. So a focus on procurement for ingredients, commodities, packaging, services. So my journey to sustainability was really through sourcing sustainability and now into soil health, regenerative agriculture, and agriculture as a climate lever. and have been fortunate to work with How Good over the past couple of years, Ethan and Kate, to bring more regenerative business principles to how we approach our global impact work. So it's nice to be with everyone today.
It's so nice to have you. I would like to start out just by, I know that for myself personally and for a lot of people on this call, it's really exciting to see organizations like Unilever and General Mills starting to explicitly talk about their commitments and goals using the word regenerative. And so I'd like to hear from each of you maybe what regenerative means to you personally and to your organization at large.
Who would you like to go first?
Dorothy, why don't you go ahead and start us off?
Sure. So personally, I think the word regenerate means to bring something back. So to bring something back that potentially used to be there or that should be there. So that's really what I feel we're doing with regenerative agriculture. We launched the principles last year, and really, really happy that it ended up being principles so that we could actually really regenerate. So with these principles, we're able to kind of look at the individual farm, the ecosystem, where the ingredients are grown, and able to then implement the principles that make sense, which also really, really enable improving soil health. So I think these are the things that really mean regenerating. So improving soil health, not just sustaining, improving the use of water by reusing and recycling, improving biodiversity, so life above and below ground, improving livelihoods, improving climate resiliency, and also, of course, decreasing greenhouse gas emissions. So that's what I personally see as regenerating, and that's what we have created in our regenerative agriculture principles.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I'd say all that, and as I thought about what regenerative agriculture means, or what regenerative or regeneration means to me, I thought kind of about the opposite of a death spiral. So more of like a life spiral. So how things just are getting better, coming back to life. You know, this thought about vitality for ecosystems and communities and interconnected systems. And so a lot of thought about how to bring lots of different approaches in a systems approach to combat systems challenges, you know, both within communities and within agricultural ecosystems, then broader food systems. And so spending a lot of time thinking about regeneration. And I think regenerative agriculture is, had I had a chance to do it over, I might have said regeneration in agriculture or regeneration for agriculture versus regenerative agriculture, just because I think it's saying like there is something, and there's something that's a standard. And I think what Dorothy had noted is that it really is about principles and local context of places. And so regenerating life sheds, starting with supply sheds and supply chains is how we're thinking about some of the work, and how I think about some of the opportunities in my personal life, right? With this life spiral, and what are the things that I can do within my own community to transform the systems around me.
Thank you. I think I'd like to talk a little bit. You touched on this a bit just now, and talking about what I'd like to ask, what does it mean for an organization to practice outcomes-based rather than practice-based regeneration in agriculture? And why is that important? Because I think it's something that we're starting to hear more and more about. And I think people on the call could benefit from kind of what is the distinction, and why are people talking about it? Jay, if you want to start out, since I think you touched on it, and then Dorothy, if you have anything to add.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think there's so much promise in the concepts of regeneration and, you know, applied to ecosystems and communities that really want to hold it up so that it means something. And I think how we make it mean something is ensuring that when we talk about regeneration, anything that we're measuring regeneration. And so really a focus on documenting outcomes or, verified impacts, thinking about how we can help producers, farmers, ranchers, dairies, and certain supply sheds that we care about go and implement the principles, kind of the what of, systems transformation, but that we also measure the so what. Because those outcomes, I think we can really rally around as a food industry and an agri-food industry, is that we all care about these things, and it's not going to look the same in all these different places. So for that reason, I think we're very aligned to a principles and outcomes-based approach that's kind of rooted in our definition. But when we can get context specific, it's where we have an opportunity to, I think, understand what are those techniques and practices that when stacked together drive those outcomes that are informed by principles, and not just the ecological outcomes, but the social and economic outcomes as well for the community. So we've had an outcomes-based approach for some time of our sustainability work. We think it's really important, but I think it's one of many approaches that we need in an overall system to make sure that we have the right amount of rigor and credibility for what we end up talking about.
Great, thank you. Yeah, Dorothy, if you want to talk about the way that Unilever is approaching outcomes, if and how Unilever is approaching outcomes-based versus practice-based.
Sure. So we've been in the space of growing food kind of in more of a sustainable way, following the Sustainable Agriculture Code of Unilever for the past 12 years. And with those, we do quite a bit of measuring, but not measuring everything. So it's kind of like piloting something, measuring it, and then kind of going forward without measuring it again. And that's how we kind of have verified the code to really show that these practices that the different suppliers and farmers are doing really do have a positive outcome, or at least, sustain whatever that element is. So we've been doing that for quite some time. I think the shift that and that's really based on kind of outcomes and then shaping what we do, on the ground with the farmers and the suppliers to be better every time. So taking the outcomes, learning, going further. I think the difference between that and what we're doing with the regenerative agriculture principles at Unilever is we're measuring the impact. So first we're measuring, of course, the outcome, and then really looking at what is that impact, and then what does that impact mean? So if the impact is, we implemented this way of kind of, let's say, decreasing or eliminating chemical fertilizers and therefore decreasing the damage to the soil, and therefore had an increase on yield, and therefore had an improvement on the livelihoods. And that's the impact that we're really looking at, right? Because then we can say that then, they were able to produce more of that crop, or they were able to be more climate resilient so that their harvest was. And then, of course, the overall outcome is different than the impact. So then the impact on the ecosystem is what we're looking at now. And I think it's really important for a variety of reasons. I think one is really for learnings and for scale up. I think, the thing I want to openly say is that with regenerative agriculture principles, the beauty of them is that they're individually based on, what's needed in that situation in order to improve various elements that need to be improved. That being said, that means that it isn't a code, so it needs to be individually developed, and the projects right now are individually developed, and we're doing that through pilot projects. And then in order to really figure out if these principles work, which of course, based on, research and science, they do, in order to see if they work, we have to look at the outcomes and even further, the longer term impacts, because we have to then shape the principles further so that they can be a little bit more generically implemented, so that we can really scale up and really, really transform the way that ingredients are grown. So I think that's one really big one. I think the second one is transparency in what we're doing and what we say. I think we're all aware that the skepticism is rising rapidly with, people all over the world for a variety of reasons on where the food comes from, how it's grown, what the impact is. and really creating that transparency, not just by saying we're growing our ingredients in this way, by really educating and informing and driving the awareness and also the trust in the brands to say, and then it has this impact. So actually, when you're purchasing something, you also have a positive impact. And I think that's really what everybody's going to be looking for. I know now it's a certain percentage of people, but I think it's going to become really kind of more of a global trend. So I think that's the second one. I think the third one, in my opinion, is telling the stories. So telling the stories and saying, you know, I think people are also really becoming drawn to brands that feel closer to home, that talk about, you know, the farmers and what this did for the farmers and how they changed and what they did, and really bringing those stories up and helping people understand where their food comes from. We're able to do that with regenerative agriculture principles, the outcomes and the impacts, and tell really nice stories, and also claims, so concrete claims. So instead of sustainably grown, regeneratively grown, which no one knows about but might choose anyway, we can say, you know, grown with X% less water, or, you know, decrease X% greenhouse gas emissions, or improve livelihoods, or by X%, or increase yield by X%, safeguarding the future of our food. And I think people are really going to be looking for those from food brands to say, you know, so what? So you grow your food sustainably. So what? That could really be seen as, you know, a lie and not truthful, and could be across everything. But if you say grown with X%, that's really, really concrete. And we know that that really drives trust and really drives preference.
Wow, thank you so much. There was so much good content in there, and I want to touch on every single piece of it. I think I'll start by directing this question to you, Jay, something that Dorothy just touched on, about educating consumers about regenerative efforts, and how regenerative is something that I think we believe is on a spectrum, and there is no one particular definition of regenerative. That makes educating consumers about it that much more difficult. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit, especially your organization that has so many brands and such a wide array of products, how you're going about educating your consumers about that regenerative principle.
Yeah, of course. Excuse me. You know, I think our natural organic businesses have done some work here, you know, with Annie's, Epic leading the way as it relates to soil health and regenerative principles. So there's been some work, great insights coming from those product launches, where we, you know, in some cases have direct connections to the farm and the producers stewarding that land. My hope is that we can also figure out how we talk about regeneration in the context of not only the product, but what the product does. Not what it is, but what it stands for, so that it's, yeah, maybe there's a differentiated ingredient in this product, but to also orient consumers and, you know, customers, investors, any really food stakeholder to say, you know, that ingredient is one thing that comes from this place, and it's one supply chain connected to this place. So how do we orient all those folks to these places, these life sheds, these communities, and say we should also be orienting ourselves to their goals, right? What are the water goals in that particular watershed? What does the community need? What are the actors that are connected to that place? What can they uniquely bring so that there's regeneration in this place, so that our marketing is about what the product does in those places that it's connected to. You know, these brands, they invest in these community-based efforts to drive transformation of ecosystems, of communities. Like that, I think that's a very different approach to marketing that we haven't figured out yet, and one that I think is inherently more regenerative, because you're talking about something bigger than just that product and just that supply chain. You're orienting it out to that bigger system that's connected to, and I think in some ways, those are going to be strategies that invite more stakeholders to participate. One of my other hopes is that sustainability can be for more people. I think right now if it's something unique, it's more costly, there's a higher premium associated. In some ways, it's excluding folks from this whole movement. And so if we can find a way to have it focused on places, what brands and ingredients are doing to regenerate those places, maybe there's a way that we can make sustainability for more people or regeneration more accessible. And thankfully, I'm not a marketer and I have to figure that out, but we're very focused on how we're structuring our investments so that we're kind of going beyond our footprint, going beyond our supply chain to have, the outcomes, but also driving progress towards those systemic effects as part of a, collaborative in a region. And I think that's what we're going to need before we get to more product level marketing, because there's still a lot of capacity building on the ground. There's still a lot of infrastructure that needs to be built out. So I think it will be about the sequencing of different investments and how we have a long-term roadmap and how we're able to build momentum with those different stakeholders over time. Those are downstream with the demand, but also those producers upstream and everyone in between that are creating these chains of value. But we have a focus on, regenerating the whole system.
Thank you. And Dorothy, I know that you talked a little bit about the consumer education aspect. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we move on to the next question?
Well, I'll add it's a challenge. So that's, I think, the first thing. In order to get the investment that we pitched for regenerative agriculture, for projects for the different brands. And I see that there's some questions about investment, so I'm happy to answer those as well. But before we pitched it, we had to, do some work to see what people really understand and what would drive them to have a preference. And, we really found, of course, the words sustainably sourced and regeneratively sourced might drive preference if everything else is equal, but it doesn't drive education and it doesn't really drive understanding. So I think, with us, both of us on the panelists here being part of kind of mainstream consumer mass kind of companies and brands, I think we have a role to play together to really get together and say, how do we raise awareness about the importance of this and then be part of that answer? Because I really struggle to think that it's going to be kind of a system one way that people will be able to right away understand and want to choose it. So I think there needs to be some real effort gone toward the importance of the way our food is grown, because it's so far away from our plates, right? It's so far away from anything that we're even connected to. A lot of people don't even have any idea how and where food is grown or at all the impact. So I think if we do really want to make this something that drives demand, which in reality, the only way that we're going to be able to keep investing in regenerative agriculture or in anything is if we also drive the demand of that. And that's just the reality of it. And that's also needs to be part of all of our roles in the system to really drive the need for it so that the supply can keep going in that way and that investment happens on both sides. So I think there's quite a bit more to be done in that space. We did find just a couple things to tell you from the research that we did with both future food leaders and also some influencers. We were trying to kind of say, a little bit more future facing generations. There were a couple key things, and I'll tell you them. One is they really want to be brought along on the journey. So to start to tell the stories sooner. So instead of just nothing and then all of a sudden a brand that nobody related to the planet or planetary health now has this claim that says, let's say go far as, climate friendly rice. And they're like, what? And they really want to be brought on that journey because that's what really will make them feel like, one, they're part of it, and also that it's real and transparent. So one is, to really bring them on the journey. And I think regenerative agriculture really gives us the opportunity to do that. And I think the second thing that we really learned about is, I have to admit, the concrete numbers. So the numbers are something that people really go for and do believe. So we want to make sure that we do that in our communication as we go forward. And the third is to do something on the, specifically if you want to do in the pack, to almost do like a whole pack takeover so that it really changes the way that it looks, so it draws the attention, and then they are more likely, of course, to take another look at it. So I think there's a whole lot of more work to be done, and I'd be happy to collaborate with others, and we're part of coalitions that are working in this space to really drive kind of the awareness of the importance of this and that this is part of the story, and then also unlock how to really do this and drive that demand so that it really does transform the food system.
Thank you. And that is such a great transition into a question that I would like to ask. And then there's some really great questions in the chat, so that I'm going to get to those as well. So Jay, you did a talk with the Soil Institute a couple of years ago where you shared a study that shows that consumers are considering big companies the cause of a lot of sustainability challenges. And so maybe you could talk, I know that you touched on this, Dorothy, but Jay, if you could talk about how you're working to change that perception going forward, I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, I think Dorothy mentioned some of it. I think it really is about making sure that we have the right narrative and not spin. So it's a narrative with impact, with real outcomes and effects, and helping people to different stakeholders to see that, you know, large food companies have a role to play. Is it going to be the same role that others play? No, but if we work all together and bring the kind of uniqueness of each of our organizations to the same opportunities, then hopefully we see more of this transformation faster. And so I think it is resourcing a lot of our stakeholders internally and externally to acknowledge that we are where we are because of our business and how we've chosen to do business, set up our agricultural system. So acknowledging that we're part of the problem, but that we can be part of the solution, and that, you know, when we're touching millions of acres, you know, the ability to go and have an impact, go and, you know, resource a change in mindset in these places that we're connected to, so that those that have different roles that they could play, you know, those, it's complementary, right? That we're all working towards the same effects and outcomes. And I think there's a role in the, you know, to educate our customers and consumers. Many of them are coming along. I think I would agree with Dorothy. I think more will come along. And I truly believe that big doesn't have to mean bad. I mean, I think there's a lot of our organizations saying that, you know, the scale gives us some unique opportunities to really think about systems transformation in a way that maybe doesn't present itself for others. So I think it's finding that sweet spot of, you know, how we're unique and what we can do as part of an overall effort, and, you know, how we drive progress through coalition, where we have shared principles, approaches, you know, targeted geographies or supply sheds. And that's where we're putting a lot of focus, is to say we have the opportunity to not only impact our supply chain, but the whole supply shed, right? If we're buying wheat in North Dakota and we're buying wheat in Minnesota, South Dakota, let's just not change who we're buying from, what our suppliers' requirements are. Let's figure out what the investments are needed to drive that whole supply shed forward. And that's good for us, but that's good for anybody who's working in that supply shed. And so that's informing some of our investments, and we're in a good position to be able to have philanthropy that we bring to the space too. So it gives us some of that cover to be able to go in after some of these big, greater good opportunities, to pair with maybe the business focused investments more targeted to our specific ingredients and supply chain. So yeah, we have a lot of work to do. I think we've learned quite a bit. And I think we are changing that narrative a bit, so that there's this understanding that it really needs to be the collective, with big companies involved, small companies, and everything in between. Because, you know, transforming agriculture is gonna it's gonna require that, really.
Absolutely. And you mentioned General Mills' million-acre commitment. I'd like to ask, what would be your advice? And I'll direct this to Dorothy first. What would be your advice for other companies who are looking at launching public commitments to regenerative agriculture? What have you learned from the process of setting that kind of public goal?
Sure. So yeah, just to get everybody, and I will admit I'm pulling them up, but just to get everybody on the same page on what our commitments are. So we launched the Compass last year, which is kind of the remake, or the update, I should say, of the Unilever Sustainable Living Plan, which was launched 10 years before that. And it has 3 pillars around health of the planet, the people, and of course, contributing to a social and equal society. And The one that regenerative agriculture fits under the most, although it hits on so many, which is also something that makes regenerative agriculture so fabulous, is around helping protect and regenerating 1.5 million hectares of lands, forests, and oceans by 2030. And then, of course, there are parts of that, such as having the greenhouse gas impact of our products across the life cycle by 2030. And then, of course, there's a piece on empowering farmers and smallholders to protect and regenerate farm environments. And then, of course, there's a water one. So there's a couple different spaces that we've really committed to around regenerative agriculture across all of the divisions. So to be clear, not just in our food and our ice cream brands, but also our other divisions that we have. So that's across the whole company. And also we launched the Climate and Nature Fund, which is $1 billion over the next 10 years, which is actually directed to the brands. So not at so much a overarching corporate level, but really directed to the brands to accelerate the work that they're doing to go forward with fixing kind of the problems with climate and nature. So it's a Climate and Nature Fund to accelerate projects in the right way in those areas, really helping the brands to create a strategy and action in the climate nature space specifically. And the reason why we did that is because we really want the brands to be able to create these projects and really stand for climate and nature, understanding that the brands really hold the power to changing people's behavior, to driving that demand, to really driving also the larger change in the world. So it's really with the brand. So it's that this fund really will fund the project itself, but the communication needs to be done by the brand. So this is a ring-fenced amount of money in this fund to do these projects. And then the brand itself needs to be able to kind of on the ground through products or through promotions or through partnerships, really put this forward to consumers and to people to say, you know, this is what we're doing, drive demand through it and educate about the importance of climate and nature and working in that direction through our food brands. So through all the brands, I'm just in foods, of course, so I'm being biased, but it's a program for all of the brands. So that's how we've kind of gone about it. And I don't know if you have read Paul Pullman's book, but it's very much about setting these commitments and not being 1000% sure if you're gonna make them. And I think that's the way that they've been done for a long time in Unilever and other companies to say, you know, this is our moonshot commitment, and this is what we really, really hope to do, and this is what we aspire to do. And the journey to get there, we're not completely sure, but let's provide ourselves a few tools to help us. And I think that's what we've done in creating the new Compass goals, the Future Foods Ambitions, which were launched 2 years ago. And then also creating the Unilever Climate Nature Fund to help us get there. So I think I feel like we're on track to get there, but of course these are long-term commitments. And I think that's something that hopefully we'll work together with others to create these coalitions so we can really get there. I think the other thing in the work that we've done with consumers and stuff that I've read is that a lot, we are expected to do this. So, you know, it's the food industry, the consumer goods industry, the retailers, we are being asked to do this, I think, of course, right now by a smaller group of consumers, but this is expected of us. But it isn't expected that we do this alone. So it isn't expected that we can do this alone. And we actually need all hands on deck. We need the government, we need NGOs, we need partners, we need experts, we need academia, we need retailers, we need restaurants, we need everybody actually to join hands and say, look, if we are going to really grow food for a longer term that is climate resilient, that does have the yield that we need, that does really fuel livelihoods, then we have to go in this direction. So I'm really happy and grateful that Unilever is such a big part of it and really trying to lead the way and utilize these principles to help us. And those, of course, are open to everyone. And we're in the process of trying to see how we can make, get to some conclusion or some guidelines around what it means to be regenerative, and also to really make sure that we're working together on how we measure our outcomes and impacts and how we report on those so that they are really credible and they are really transparent.
Wonderful, thank you. Jay, I want to give you the opportunity to add anything that you might have as far as advice, maybe for organizations who are launching a public commitment similar to the, well, maybe not similar to, 1 million acres is a lot. So maybe something on a smaller scale.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, I'd say maybe the advice is to this is, and this is work we're doing right now to try and figure out this balance of where we can have enough connection to our business and, our fair share, but also orient ourselves to the bigger systems and have set targets and goals and strategies around those. Because in some ways, I think we can get into this trap of it's like our number, our commitment, us. And it's like, how do we have more collective visioning, collaborative investment, and do that in a way that, it still fulfills the needs of a publicly traded company with, an executive management team who cares very much about metrics and progress. What might some of those metrics be that are, metrics within a supply shed, right? Like, because I'm not sure how this will play out, but I'm not sure it's the right approach to go and try to transform all these supply chains without making sure that we have the like key enabling supply shed investments first. Like that might ultimately be the lower cost strategy over time that allows for more participation in this movement. So I think we need to figure some of that out. And, the work that we're doing internally is like, how do we talk about progress towards our goal, but also how do we talk about those effects in key regions that we operate? And when you get to that point, they're not our goals, they're not our metrics. It's what are the watershed targets, right? Like what do those communities need? And I think if we can rally around those things, we'll have a lot more collective investment that might move the dial a whole heck of a lot faster if we're instead of, us, not maybe being as aligned with many focusing on specific supply chains that are oftentimes shared, but maybe not. So
Right.
That would be my advice is to just to work to find that balance where you have enough to feel like you can demonstrate that you're doing the right thing for your business and your footprint, but that you're also contributing to this collective effort and collective impact. And it's not easy. We're trying to figure out that right now with the monitoring and measurement tools that we're putting in place to be able to understand the impact of our specific investments, but then also like try and see if we can understand the broader systemic effects and ripple effects of some of these place-based supply shed investments as a way of saying, we anybody who's buying any ingredient from the Southern Plains should think about orienting to the old Ogallala Aquifer or the Arkansas River, and can we adequately address what those needs are without more of those collective goals? And so I think we're wrestling with that a little bit, and just transparently, with science-based targets as well. Science-based targets are meant to orient us to this broader planetary health goal, but then we chunk it out into individual company targets. And then what happens is it's what can we account for? Can we allocate? And we're going to need that, but we also need the kind of collective tracking and goals. And you have the same kind of philosophy, I'd love to speak to you, because I think we need a lot more aligned to that type of principle. Not to say that that's the path forward, but it's I think it's a one approach to kind of test and learn and see if there's some different pathways that we can advance in parallel with other investments and strategies.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
Yeah, and I think that How Good is very much coming from the same frame of thought, which is part of why We are so grateful to have you both here speaking to this community and furthering collaboration in the space, because it is certainly my belief, and I think I can speak for How Good as well, that that is one of the best ways forward, sharing knowledge and just working together. I'd like
the
to
total shout out to the How Good team, because I think as
Yeah.
part of our global impact team and our efforts to regenerate our approach and our thinking, there's really been strong resourcing from Ethan and others to say, how do we do this
Mhm.
in a way that's fit for the General Mills purpose? And I think it's led to some significant evolution in how we're approaching things, internally, but also how we're structuring our investments and partnerships externally. So can't say enough good things about the How Good team.
Yeah,
Well,
agree.
thanks so much.
Agree.
We are lucky to be working with you guys as well. There are so many great questions that are coming into the chat. I think that you guys addressed a couple of them just on your own and talking about answering other questions. So Wyatt and Katie, thank you for your questions. If you feel like there's anything that didn't get answered, feel free to ask to expand in the chat. The next one I'd like to address is from Kelly. And it's talking about how farmers are rewarded financially, not just for growing regenerative products, but also providing data that provides the claims about the food that they've produced in a regenerative way. And to even expand a little more, I'd like to ask how your organizations foster engagement between your executive teams and high-level decision makers and the producers that ensure that these corporate decision makers are meaningfully embedded in your supply system. Dorothy, if you'd like to begin.
Sure, I'll say a little bit about it, but I think probably Jay in his position is closer to this answer than I am. So I sit more on the corporate sustainability side and the marketing side at this point, but work very closely, of course, with our supply chain teams and our procurement teams in order to make sure that we're doing the right things, that we're able to tell the stories, meet our goals, and be part of a larger coalition to really transform the food system. So just on the first one, in relation to incentivize, so the way that we have designed our roadmap for regenerative agriculture is that we're working with suppliers and farmers that we've already worked with. So they're ones that have worked closely with to move them to the Sustainable Agriculture Code. So they're already quite close with us, and we've already built that trusted relationship in relation to how they're growing the foods and us monitoring that and being closer to that than potentially we would be if we didn't have that relationship and already implemented that. So that's the first piece, is that we already are part of kind of their ecosystem in that way. And I think the second one is in relation to, how do we incentivize and what does that mean? We've really done it through saying, really coming along with us and co-building the projects. So we very much co-created all the projects together with the partner suppliers, but also together with external partners in academia and also in, partners that have been in this space for a little bit longer or have done the more research in this space. So the partners that we've been working with and really building that coalition to help us train and talk to these farmers and the suppliers to help them really understand what's going to happen, what this will really do, what this will save on their side, and how we're working on this together and how that will be monitored. So I think one big thing, so just to outline that, one big thing is that their existing relationships, and we already have this kind of ecosystem built with them around back and forth on projects and monitoring outcomes and impacts, and then them seeing positive results of that. And then also working with them to say, what are some of the challenges you're actually having in your area, in the surrounding area, in your community? What is it that we need to address, and helping them to address that? So that's an incentive in itself, is providing that training and the mechanisms to monitor that. And we've actually already seen really, really positive results after the first harvest with our tomatoes. They reported, we of course need to measure it a little bit better, but we need to get in there and measure over time. But after just their first harvest of implementing some practices, they did see a significant increase in yield and a major decrease in use of course, cost really high costly chemicals and fertilizers. So that's one really positive one. And in rice that we're working on in the United States, they were really happy to have a monitoring system implemented so that they can help really be part of the solution from methane emissions and water use. So I think those in themselves are quite big incentives. I think the other incentive is, the security of saying, if this doesn't work, or if the harvest fails, we have to be able to say that we'll be able to support them even so. I think, going back to Jay's point on really working collaboratively, I think as we go forward, when we work collaboratively and we co-invest, it will also provide more security to the farmers, and it will also provide more security on what they're doing. I think there's also major opportunities for us to work together with maybe unlikely crops that haven't been grown together in the past, to really let them kind of naturally regenerate and work together. And I've seen many really cool examples where that also increases yield. So I'm hoping once we kind of get to that space, we're able to co-invest. That also provides investment to the farmer, of course, for growing a new crop, having higher yields, and then of course getting the funding to, also from selling another crop. So I think there can be major incentives in that sense. And I'm very briefly going to touch on the question about communication through everybody. I think in Unilever, I'm happy to say we have very clear kind of roles and responsibilities on who's communicating with who and how that whole kind of communication relationship runs. And I think there's a lot of trust within our leadership team on who's driving that and who's going forward with that, and kind of really trusting that that person's doing the right thing in that space. So I haven't seen major challenges in that space, but maybe I'm not as close to as Jay is, so I'll hand it over to him to touch on that.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, quickly. I mean, we're spending a lot of time supporting the build out of ecosystem services markets, and so we think that's an important element of rewarding producers for generating services for society, whether that be carbon reductions, water quantity or quality improvements, and hopefully biodiversity, other things down the road. I see that Jack's on from the Ecosystem Services Market Consortium, so that's a key element of our strategy around providing some financial incentive for those outcomes, right? There also be places where we have more direct connections, perhaps smaller supply chains, where we can determine what those kind of ingredient or product level attributes are, and find the right way to verify or measure impact from those systems or practices, so that we can create a differentiated market for producers in that space. So I think those are a couple ways. We're also investing a lot as it relates to the holistic surround for producers in these places, so that they have the training, the technical assistance, the financial cost share where it makes sense, that all those different support structures that producers may need given the local context. And so there's incentives for what they generate, but also incentives to kind of join the movement and potentially even expand the movement as a farmer mentor or coach, right? That's done some of this already, that now has the opportunity to share that knowledge with others. So that's what I would share. Very, very focused on building out ecosystem services markets, payment for performance and payment for outcomes. And then, as it relates to the question about making sure that we have the farmer voice represented, I think we still have some more work to do there. Thankfully, our regenerative agriculture team has a chance to get out on the landscape and really connect with producers in those local contexts and supply sheds to bring some of those key insights back to our teams at General Mills and our executive management team as well. But there's probably more things we could do. I would acknowledge that. And we have had the opportunity to highlight some of our key partners in Soil Health Academy and Understanding Ag, some of Gabe Brown's organizations, where he's actually had a chance to come and sit with our executive management team to talk about the work that they're doing, what some of the key barriers are as part of the education internally. So we do have some of that happening, but there's more work to do. And that's really where I'd like to focus our efforts moving forward, is to elevate the producer's voice and the producer's role in all this. I mean, I think often it's like, where's the demand? Who's driving demand? Who has the commitments? And we're figuring that all out. But as the producers are the ones that are changing how they operate, transforming their approach to managing their systems, and we have an opportunity to highlight more of that. So that's what I would share.
Just great. Just a quick point, because I want to address some of the things in the chat, just to make sure that we're all aligned, because I think, Jay, you really addressed some crucial parts around making sure that we have a close connection to the producers on ground and making sure that that communication is happening. I also just want to be super transparent in saying that we are very open to the fact that the farmers on the ground know the most about their crop, and know the most about what works, and know the most about the whole ecosystem of what's needed and what's around. And I think that's the great thing, in my opinion, about regenerative agriculture principles, is it very much honors that, and it very much says what is happening on the ground right now, and how can we help you be trained in these principles to implement them in order to really help what's going on, or any challenges that you're having, or any challenges you foresee. And that's how the projects are being created, in order to make sure that we're taking into account the knowledge of the farmers and the knowledge of their connection to nature in that space. And I think we have to be really careful as the food industry to say, we have this commitment to make that we've made, we have this code that you have to do, we have this stuff you have to do so we can make this claim, when in reality, it really needs to be focused on us being part of securing a food system that can feed people and feed livelihoods and be better for the planet. So I think, I don't want to act like any of that isn't happening. That's very much how our projects are designed. We have lots of catch-ups with them. We have visited a lot of them. We've spoken to them. We've tried to get them to pronounce the word regenerative, which is quite hard. So it turned out to be quite hard in many situations, but that didn't matter in the end. So I think, I want to be really clear that it is very much created from literally the ground up and reformed based on that. So just to be really clear, and I think Jay was saying the same, is that co-creation piece.
Thank you for taking a second to clarify on your position there. We are getting to the end of our time together. I wish we had another hour. I think that there's so much here. And I know that there are some questions in the chat that we weren't able to get to. But I'd just like to quickly wrap up our time together. I know you both have a ton of brands within your organizations, but I'd like to see if there's any particular one that you would like to direct our attention to, like if there was one regenerative or sustainable product in your portfolio that you wanted us to go out and try or wanted to highlight right now, if you feel comfortable sharing that. I know it's like picking a favorite child, but I'm going to ask you to do it anyway.
Transparency. Oh, I'll go first with full transparency, in saying that the brands that have worked in regenerative agriculture before our principles came out is very much Ben and Jerry's. So they've been working in the space of regenerative dairy for a while now. Some of our tea brands that are now moving to Ecoterra, a company that has merged off, they have been working in the space of regenerative agriculture. And our journey in the world of the others have been really experimenting with it starting just a couple of years ago. So none of our products right now in the food, in the kind of food brands in Unilever right now have ingredients that are grown in regenerative ways, following the regenerative agriculture principles. Our first project kicked off, three projects kicked off last year in the US and in Europe. 5 projects kick off this year. This is specifically in the Knorr brand, who has the largest roadmap. We have regenerative agriculture soy in the US and a few others, but it won't be yet in our products. But when it is, I'll be sure to let you know.
Well, thank you. I look forward to seeing their updates and giving them a try.
But sustainably sourced vegetables and herbs are in all of our products.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Jay, do you have anything to share? I feel like I've really put you guys on the spot here.
No, I mean, I'd say shout out to Annie's Homegrown. I mean, I think they've really led the charge in a lot of ways with talking about soil health and talking about, systems that can help save the planet. Certainly a lot more work to do, but I think they've really pioneered the way for many, and really serve as a great incubator and learning laboratory for the broader General Mills business. I think we all celebrated internally when there was a soil profile on the box of a mac and cheese and Bunny Graham. So, Annie's incredible work, really visionary stuff coming out of their brand and business teams. And I think it's really helped to provide those early insights that we can then think about bringing to some of our bigger brands and businesses, what might fit, what might not fit. But also having a young family at home, Annie's mac and cheese is a staple in our household. So that's one I'd probably call out.
Awesome. Well, that brings us right to the end of our time together. Thank you so much to both of you for taking the time. I know you're very busy to talk with us about your perspective and some strategies. I know that you're working really hard, and it's inspiring to see organizations who are moving the needle toward a more regenerative model. Everyone, please tune in to our next innovation series, which you can check out on our website. And also, if any of you are going to be at Expo West next week, How Good will be there. We'd love to see you. Feel free to reach out to me, to anyone on our sales team, to anyone that you can find from How Good. We would love to see you all there. So thanks again, and I'll end it there. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.